section. My name is Paul Dezay. Today, we're going to be taking a look at two passages. We're going to take a look at Luke 21, 5-19, and also 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 6-13. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Yesterday's reading was Luke 21, 5-19. It's about the destruction of the temple. All right, so that's what we got going on here. The destruction of the temple took place in AD 70, and this is apocalyptic literature that predicts, kind of warns against the destruction of the temple. It's kind of set up pretty clearly in verse number 5 of Luke 21, when some were speaking about the temple, how it was adorned in beautiful stones and gifts dedicated to God. He says, "As for these things that you see, the days will come when not one stone will be left upon another, all will be thrown down." And sure enough, in AD 70, Rome came and destroyed it all, right? They tore down the temple, and a lot of people were killed. It was a scary day. So this is predicting that. A couple things that stood out to me in addition to the judgment against the temple is that God needs to be trusted in the midst of scary days. So if you look through the rest of the passage, there is just a list of all of these signs and persecution and all these crazy things that are going on. And throughout it, Jesus is giving kind of a request to say, hey, trust me in the midst of this tragedy because I've got you in this. And so God is judging the temple because it's become corrupt. You take a look at all around this particular passage, the verses that preceded it in the beginning of Luke 21, the widow's offering, the widow is giving all her money to the temple, but it was the temple's responsibility to take care of widows. And so Jesus judges the corrupt temple system. You look at later on in Luke 21, you see the lesson of the fig tree, which is against judgment against the temple. So there's this judgment against the corrupt systems of the temple, and Jesus, in the midst of destruction of the temple, is there with the followers, the believers, getting them through this horrible time. So we're called to trust. And then even in the midst of destruction, there's always hope. You look at the last couple verses, verse number 18, "But not a hair on your head will be perished. By your endurance, you'll gain your souls." There is even hope in the midst of this horrible tragedy. So we take a look at this, not as a prediction of the end of the world, but a prediction of a historical event that did take place in the year AD 70 when Jerusalem was destroyed. This is judgment against the temple. And the temple got what it wanted, which is what oftentimes God does for us. He lets us have what we wanted. And so Rome conquered and destroyed the temple. And so God saw through those who were following him, provided safety for them. And that doesn't mean necessarily that they saved their lives, but it means they have hope for the resurrection. All right, that's enough about that one. Let's jump over to 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 6-13. So if you were studying 2 Thessalonians last Tuesday, you noticed that Jesus said the day of the Lord has not happened yet. There's a future day, a day of the Lord. In those days, people have been telling the church that the day of the Lord had happened, right? And so Jesus is saying, no, not yet. The day of the Lord, judgment day, will be coming in the future. In this particular text that speaks of idleness, it's misused quite a bit to tell people that poor people are lazy, that they don't want to work. And so this particular passage has been taken and used to speak against poor people and saying, you know what, they don't work for a living, they just abuse the system and things like that. And that's not at all what's going on here. Paul is saying that God is forming a community and everyone has a part to play in it. And so there are those through all times will come and disrupt the flow of the community. And that's what he's speaking against. He's speaking out disruptive and disturbing people who are messing up the flow of the community. Everyone has a part to play. We're all part of the body. We're all living stones making up the temple of God. We all have gifts and talents to be given towards the church, right? And so in those days, there are people who did not contribute their part. They were users and not givers. And therefore, Paul has some words to say to them, but this is not at all judgment against poor people. This is not at all judgment about laziness. This is about people refusing to do what God had called them to do. And the church can't be the church unless everyone plays the part. And we got that going on today in our world, right? We got a lot of people who attend church and they're consumers, right? They take, but they do not give their part, right? And so Paul speaks against that here in this particular passage. I'd say if there was a value that Paul was lifting up, it's the need for accountability. We all need a disciplined life, and we need people to keep us in check, right? So a few weeks ago, Pastor Jennifer Kaufman, who is our spiritual formation pastor, introduced Wesley's bands to our staff as a way to kind of take this core value of accountability and put some legs to it. So that's one thing that we need to be reminded of. We need accountability in our lives. We need discipline in our lives. So just like the people who are idle within this text need accountability, so do we. And so Paul's trying to boost up the value of accountability within the community there that he's writing to. All right, that's what I got. Sorry for babbling so much today. Hey, so if you would share what you got out of either text, Luke 21, 5-19, or 2 Thessalonians 3, 6-13, one or both, share your thoughts. I would love to learn from you. And hey, we'll be back tomorrow for Isaiah 65. Have a great day. Stay warm out there. Grace and peace.